My husband vanished into a world of carefree singles, leaving me and our children stranded, only to reappear years later as if he expected our story to simply rewind. At 29, I had once embraced the promise of marriage, yet for the past 6 years I journeyed into that union only to face a divorce 3 years ago. My 2 little boys, aged 4 and 5, born of my union with Adam, a 30-year-old man, now live solely under my care, for he refused to be tethered by family ties. We had spent 3 blissful years together, cradling our 2 beautiful children and dreaming of a home beyond our cramped apartment, until the day he abruptly declared, "I want to be single and explore the world right now." Having grown up side by side since high school, he was my first, and I was his entire world. I always believed our bond was meant to last forever. Yet, after 3 years under one roof, he admitted his unhappiness, insisting that we both be released from the burdens of marriage and family so we might live fully. His words, drenched in an odd, freethinker lilt reminiscent of my father's radical musings, left me bewildered, especially when he claimed to love me even as he confessed a self-love that demanded its own adventure. I even suggested a temporary open marriage, despite the pain it would cause, just to keep him from truly disappearing, but he was resolute in seeking divorce to embrace his newfound freedom. My heart shattered in that moment, as tears streamed down my face. He assured me that if we were meant to be, he'd find his way back. Absurd and unjust as it was, that marked the end of our marriage, and yet, the storm was only beginning. Then, as if seized by a sudden whim, he packed his bags one morning and departed to chase a life of solitary wanderlust, abandoning me and our children without a backward glance. When I dared ask what fate he envisioned for our little ones, his response was chilling: leave them with someone trustworthy while he embarked on his globe-trotting escapade, meeting new people and indulging in endless adventure. I was dumbfounded, because to me, bringing a child into this world means shouldering the unbreakable duty to nurture, protect, and provide for every need. No parent should ever vanish in pursuit of fleeting thrills, leaving innocent hearts behind. That stark truth sealed my resolve. He was utterly deranged. So, I relinquished the fight, accepting the divorce without contest, especially when his affluent parents made alimony and child support trivial matters. Granted, he retained visitation rights, but his rare visits, involving me dropping the kids off at his parents' house while he hid in another room to avoid painful reminders, evaporated after a couple of months. And still, the echoes of his departure haunted me. Months later, a revelation came through my friend Rachel, who, thanks to mutual acquaintances with Adam, uncovered the true catalyst behind his transformation. Her cousin, a member of that wild circle which had ensnared Adam, finally confided the sordid details. I can't fault her for the delay. Her distant ties meant the truth emerged only after our divorce was final, and even knowing it sooner wouldn't have changed the outcome. According to her, this cousin embodied a hedonistic, untethered lifestyle, not just for Adam, but for a band of 6 or 7 men who fiercely rejected the bonds of commitment. Introduced into this orbit by a coworker, Adam, then a married man with children, soon succumbed to their seductive mantra. Her cousin boasted about converting a man to believe he could cast off his wife and children like dead weight, fully committing to their cult-like ideology. Curious about what kind of man would forsake his family for such radical ideals, Rachel's cousin pointed to a group photo featuring Adam. In that instant, the pieces fell into place, and she texted me the damning truth as soon as she left the gathering, hinting that darker undercurrents were yet to come. That entire conversation had taken place at one of her family gatherings, after which she implored me to meet immediately. I agreed, and within moments, she burst into my apartment, spilling every sordid detail of Adam's betrayal. To say my fury was immense would be a vast understatement. Discovering that my husband had abandoned us simply to fit into some absurd clique, a ploy to appear brave and adventurous, sent my heart spiraling into disbelief. In that searing moment, I mused that perhaps I'd have preferred infidelity with another, a more tangible reason to end our union, rather than this farcical quest for group validation. I longed to scream curses at him, yet deep down I knew he was too far gone. No word or act could compel him to change. So, I resolved to rebuild my world, raising my sons to surpass the man he had been and working relentlessly so that they'd never know abandonment. I enlisted a nanny and threw myself into my career, determined that every moment at home belonged solely to my children. With unwavering support from my parents, and only minimal, embarrassed assistance from my in-laws who footed the child support bills, I focused on nurturing my kids while whispers spread that Adam squandered his fortune on lavish trips and high-end hotels. I devoted every ounce of strength to raising my 2 sweet, obedient boys, crafting a family out of love alone. I exiled the memory of our failed marriage from my thoughts, buoyed by a career that now earned me twice as much, and for 2 peaceful years, I believed life had found its balance, until last week, when Adam reappeared after nearly 3 years of total absence. On a quiet Sunday, my children and I lingered in our cherished apartment, a sanctuary I loved despite having enough money to buy a house, because its convenience for work was irreplaceable. My reluctance to move, however, turned against me. Adam, ever the shadow of my past, discovered where I lived. That day, he appeared unannounced at our door, a shock so profound it stole my breath away. For several agonizing seconds, neither of us spoke as I absorbed the sight, a gaudy bouquet of red roses clutched in his hand and a tear-streaked smile playing on his lips. Call me heartless, but his display stirred nothing but seething contempt within me. Before he could utter a word, I slammed the door shut with such force that the floorboards trembled. I quickly ushered the kids inside, knowing he would soon try to spin some half-hearted excuse, and I refused to let them witness another ugly confrontation. Sure enough, once the children were safely away, Adam began whining about how this wasn't the welcome he'd expected, his voice cracking as if he struggled to hold back tears. His pitiful act only ignited my rage further. After all, he had tormented me for years, and now he had the audacity to act like a victim. He rambled about coming back to apologize for his past misdeeds and reclaim his old life. Stunned, I let him speak, partly craving the closure I'd never received. In that twisted moment, I savored the chance to remind him that our lives were far better without him, and that no one missed him in his absence. He continued for minutes, recounting how he'd reveled in his wild escapades over the past few years, yet confessed that he now felt unbearably empty, bereft of a true home and haunted by the sterility of empty hotel rooms. He admitted that an aching void had plagued him for months, ultimately forcing him into a difficult decision, to return and offer his apology, hoping to mend the past. Apparently, the high of exploring life with his new friends had faded after just a few months, but he stubbornly clung to that nomadic lifestyle, too frightened to truly come back. He argued that, having sacrificed so much for that life, he was bound to commit fully, and now, unable to envision any alternative, he simply craved his former life. The more he spoke, the more I felt an overwhelming urge to fling the door open and land a savage punch on his face. I could no longer tolerate his endless excuses, so I flatly demanded that he leave us alone and that I wanted no further contact. Yet Adam, in his deluded manner, believed that if he kept rambling outside my door, his persistent pleas might eventually sway me. Finally, needing to call the kids for dinner, I banged the door shut and roared that we were no longer his family. That declaration shattered him, and after that, he fell silent. Once the children were settled with their meal, I immediately called my attorney to recount every detail for safety's sake, then contacted my parents, who reassured me that I had done exactly what was necessary. I avoided my in-laws, unsure how to broach the subject, certain that they would eventually learn the truth from their own son. No sooner had I finished those calls than Rachel's voice rang through the phone, her tone laced with urgency as she asked if Adam had come around. When I confirmed, she revealed that her cousin had called her with startling insights. Rachel and I have always been inseparable, and her insights about Adam have proven invaluable, even apart from this entire debacle. According to her, her cousin had vowed that any truth about Adam would be delivered directly to her, especially since I was the one he had so callously wronged. Perhaps he'd lost his smug pride in converting to their warped ideology, but I placed the blame squarely on Adam for being so easily swayed. Her cousin promised to keep us updated and even mentioned that Adam had once reached out with a feeble apology after learning of my plight, a gesture I forgave, though we were never truly friends. He confided in Rachel about his escapades, and that's how I learned what he'd been up to after he blocked me post-divorce. Now, her cousin had called to reveal the real reason behind Adam's return, and she passed this damning revelation along to me. Apparently, their tight-knit friend circle maintained a group chat since their first meeting, and just hours before his doorstep appearance, Adam had announced his intentions to them. Though his companions initially offered support, he exploded with anger at what he saw as fake solidarity. He claimed they betrayed him by embracing relationships, leaving him the only fool who'd abandoned his wife and children in favor of a reckless life with his boys. Even those now in steady relationships, men nearing 40, one even engaged, reminded him that their old ideology of unbound freedom was merely a relic of youth. In the end, every boast and radical idea they once paraded was thrown out the window, leaving Adam to suffer alone for buying into such nonsense. And as the storm within him swelled, the conflict with his former allies exploded into a monumental fight. Then, when he announced his desire to reclaim his old life, it wasn't enough for him. He demanded that his former friends apologize for forcing him to leave his wife and kids. That, he claimed, was the root of their strife. The others, standing firm in their beliefs, made it clear that they'd never told him to forsake us. He had chosen that path on his own, driven by a misguided need to belong. Although he could have maintained friendships without sacrificing his responsibilities at home, his pursuit of endless wanderlust cost him dearly. Now, with most of those men settled into stable relationships, he felt a crushing pressure to fit in, a pressure that spurred his return, not from duty or emptiness as he claimed, but from the desperate need to conform. Learning all this from Rachel set my blood boiling, mixed with a sting of guilt for having turned him away. Had I known sooner, I would have unleashed a barrage of retribution. Yet, Rachel's cousin had been too absorbed in work to check his messages, and only after hours did he inform her, who then called me with the news. Armed with this new understanding, I resolved unequivocally, I would not allow him back into our lives, and I felt no remorse. He had never shown a shred of regret for the pain he inflicted on me and our children. He was, without question, a terrible man, and that was final. I braced myself for his inevitable next attempt, but in the days that followed, silence reigned. Even when I urged Rachel to press her cousin further, she admitted having no clue about Adam's next move, especially since he had blocked the entire group chat, even barring her cousin, who had been uninvolved in the quarrel. With no window into his plans, a call from my in-laws 3 days later caught me completely off guard. They sought to discuss the harsh words I had hurled at Adam during his visit, insisting that since they continued to pay child support and ensure the children's proper upbringing, I had no right to dismiss him as family. A heated verbal spat ensued, ending with me abruptly hanging up. Torn between my yearning for my kids to have a father and my desperate need to protect them, I found myself adrift, with only my children occupying my thoughts. After declaring that my children and I were no longer his family, the updates began to unfold. Update 1. I want to thank everyone for their support. I've decided to appeal the custody arrangement to strip him of his visitation rights. I'm uncertain of the outcome, but it's a risk worth taking, especially after 2 days of receiving such heartfelt advice, which both my parents and I wholeheartedly endorse. Paying child support merely signified that Adam and his parents had fulfilled their legal obligations. Every other responsibility had fallen solely on me, as I raised our kids while he frolicked with his friends, choosing his moments of presence at whim. Update 2. Today, I filed for the termination of Adam's parental rights, a decision I deeply regret not making sooner, right after he stopped visiting in the first few months. Better late than never, they say, though many have criticized my move, claiming I'm depriving my kids of a father. Yet, they never truly had a present dad, and who knows if Adam might vanish again. Absent for 3 long years, he now deserves a permanent exit from parenthood, free to chase his whims, but never at the expense of my emotions or my children's well-being. I truly believe I'm not robbing them of anything, as they never had a father to begin with, so they won't miss him. Update 3. Although I haven't entirely terminated his rights, at least now he may only meet the kids under my strict supervision. This prevents him from dictating our lives on his own terms. If he can eventually prove himself a reliable father, perhaps the court will reconsider our arrangement, but for now, this is the best we can do. As for me, reconciliation is out of the question, non-negotiable. After a recent court hearing, when he tried once more to speak with me, I snapped, revealing that I knew all about his pathetic need to fit in with his friends. I told him to go marry them instead, for I was utterly done. Had he not been the father of my kids, I wouldn't have even deigned to waste a word on him. I then walked away with the children, leaving him and his parents gaping in stunned silence, a bitter moment of satisfaction. That is the reality now. I cannot predict what the future holds, but I am relieved that, at least for my children, things have finally begun to settle. If Adam ever manages to become a responsible father, perhaps my kids might escape a life devoid of genuine paternal guidance, and maybe even learn to shave without resorting to online tutorials. But if he dares to pull even a fraction of his old stunts again, he'll face a reckoning like no other. He's toyed with my mind long enough, and I will never allow him to endanger my children's well-being again.